Session 105. Good evening. I can see that you have both had quite a time. Rupert's abilities have indeed jumped up another level, and that is why he is jumpy, if you will excuse the pun. I realize that Rupert in particular is in no mood for levity, and I would for this sake tell him that the information contained in his psychological time experiments and in his dreams of late is merely the fabrications of his subconscious, of which in the past he was not aware. However, I cannot tell him this, since he has indeed received a communication from someone he knew as his mother's friend, and he received further information or collaborative information in his own psychological time experiences. Ram noted, it might be of interest to note that Helen McEwen, the communicant in Jane's dream of November 8th, has been dead for perhaps 2 years. Jane's mother so informed her in a letter. Jane had not met Helen McEwen for at least 15 years. She estimates and remembers her best from her, Jane's grade school years. Thus, that seems to be saying in the above paragraph that Jane received a communication through a personality that has been dead for 2 years. When Jane described her dream to me, I had mistakenly taken it for granted that Helen McEwen was still alive. Jane's dream, Sunday night, November 8th, 1964. A boy handed me a long, legal-sized black envelope. Helen McEwen's name was the return address, written in black ink on the envelope. She was a friend of my mother's, now dead. I took the envelope to contain notification of my mother's death. I guess I opened it and read inside. Lo, now, I don't recall doing so. Then, with relief saw that the death was not to be that close. Not my mother, but a young girl, got the name Linda and the last name, which I think I have forgotten. Don't think it was but there was a connection with Linda. I was relieved that it wasn't my mother, but my reasoning was cold-blooded. First I thought, well, I've always feared my mother's death, and I was almost relieved that it was over. Then relief when it wasn't her death, but someone else's. If it is a death, and in Rob's family, say of Linda, which I doubt, then why the return name of my mother's friend, with whom I was not close? Maybe one of my nieces, instead of Rob's. Join? In dream, I think the death must have already happened. My death? No feeling that it was, though I could have substituted names. But the person to die was younger than I am, I think. And who was the boy? He waited while I read the message inside, but I can't remember reading it, just interpreting it. Somewhat unsettling dream. They said, first of all, when he cried out silently for you during a recent psychological time experience, it was because he sensed, through inner communications, a situation concerning a death in which he would need your support. The poor Rob cry was his regret at having to depend upon your support, taking, he feared, energy from your work, and a regret based on fear that he always feels whenever he is forced to rely upon someone's strength. Rob noted, see Jane's side-time experience of November 6, page 127. Say said he fears that he will be loved when he gives support, but not loved when he must rely or ask it from another person. Sensing a debt, immediately fearing that it was yours, Joseph, since he heard himself call for you, he hastily attempted to sacrifice his previous husband in your place. Therefore, the mix-up of names when he wrote down his experience. He then attempted to forget it. Last night's dream. Ram noted. Jane now paused beside my table, her eyes closed. She lifted a hand. Say said, Robert is trying not to block me, but there is some difficulty, which we will attempt to overcome. Last night's dream was a communication from the heaven, who was the friend of Robert's mother. The message was directed to Robert. He did not pick it up from his mother. The envelope, the black envelope, was obviously a symbol, but it did enable Robert to see the name of the woman who was sending the message. And the import of the dream was clear to him, merely in the perception of that simple data. The black envelope, with the return name in the left-hand corner, and though he does not recall it, his name on the envelope as the person to whom the communication was sent. Even in his dream, he was stunned, afraid that the debt was his own. This is why he could not remember that the envelope was addressed to him. In his dream, therefore, which he knew he would remember because of his training, he then added shielding fabrications, interwoven with the valid information. His mother then let this pass. We are doing well, but for now we find this sentence cannot be completed. He then attempted to substitute the name of Linda, your niece, and pretended not to know whose death was being perceived. Nor could he recall reading the message or the name that was inside. That is why he cannot remember actually opening the envelope. In any case, opening the envelope was superfluous. The relief he felt after deciding that he had safely tricked himself, he thought in the morning, was due to the fact that the future death was not his mother's or his own, but one involving a relative at least somewhat distant. The relief, of course, was the result of his partial success in distorting the information. But despite distortions, the sender can do, and the sex of the person whose death was unfortunately perceived. That is in your state of affairs. A future death certainly seems unfortunate to the nth degree, but the perception of it is beneficial, insofar as it will serve to prepare those in any way involved. We are going about this explanation in our own way. Robert and I have a pact now, of which he is not consciously aware, and if I observe certain niceties or conventions, which I am perfectly willing to accept, then he lets me through. As a rule, he will. It involves my not shocking him right away with painful data, but working around it rather craftily, and yet still in my own way getting the material across. Are your hands tired? I would prefer them to continue without a break, but I will end the session early if it appears advisable to do so. It is more difficult for Robert if he has a break under such conditions as those that exist this evening. The boy who delivered the message in Robert's dream was partially a dream construction, representing a George Pilot, Jr., with whom Robert felt an affinity in early life, a relative, a cousin, who is also psychically connected with Rupert's mother, and who is subconsciously connected in Rupert's mind with the death of his grandfather. Since the boy, who is now a man, was kind to Rupert at that time. The psychological experience today was a reinforced message, tied in with the others, which again Rupert tried to forget and could not quite manage, because he has now trained himself to recall such data. Such communications, though not necessarily tragic ones, are being received by every inner self. In this case, even while distortions come through, there is a validity of basic undistorted material. I here suggest that Rupert break after all. Give him a glass of milk and a bit of solid food, and then, if he is up to it, and I think that he shall be, we will continue. The distortions referred to represent those occurring in the dream and in the psychological time experiences, particularly in today's experience, in which Rupert saw the white-gowned hospital personnel. This made him more worried that the future death foreseen was his own, since he was looking up at a nurse and a doctor while they looked down at him. He heard the words spoken by a nurse. She is still in shock, but he distorted the words so that he remembered them as being, she is coming out of shock. The incident or hospital scene was valid, in that the death will occur in such surroundings. It reinforced the sex of the person involved, and it audits the environment. Rupert, however, constructed the images subconsciously, and then perceived them. The particular event as he saw it was not valid, but the information contained therein was valid. The word "she is still in shock," however, referred not to the person whose death was being perceived, but the words referred to Rupert as Jane, still being in a state of shock because of the clairvoyant information. Thinking that the words referred to the physical condition of the person whose death was foreseen, Rupert changed them as mentioned in an effort to better the situation. You will see here that indirectly but clearly we have given you the identity of the person whose death is foreseen, particularly when I add to the positive statement, though it may appear negative, that your mother, Joseph, is in no way involved. Rupert is calmer now, and I may add not only that his death was not involved in any manner, but also that his death will not occur for many years. He is extremely touchy, for all his training, upon this subject in general. We can progress now to the subject of the car incident. You thought you hit something in the road, a stone perhaps, and Rupert was insistent that he had seen a cat, and that the car had struck it. He wondered what had happened to the cat, and you went back together to see. There was no cat. The above-mentioned matters were on his mind. His eyes under good circumstances are inefficient. He saw a gray-brown bag of clothes used to collect thieves, and usually connected to lone mourners. It lay on or by the curb with thieves in it, and it had metal eyelids and another projection. It had been disconnected from a moor. The man left it momentarily. He was caught inside. You hit this and threw it, but it did not fly up, and the color mixed well with the pile of leaves there. It was gone when you returned. Now that this is finished, we can return again to the subject at hand. and the mirror instance. The mirror, again, would have offered valid data had Ruber looked into it. But again, he grew frightened, and the mirror was, once more, a means by which information could be made intelligible to him, and specific, though the mirror in larger terms did not exist. This does not make the experience any less valid. Merely it was the use of a metal implement, through which valid information could be received. He did not use the implement, that is, he would not look into it. Now, we can say that Ruber has received valid information concerning his mother's death, which has not yet occurred, but the conditions which will cause it have begun. I will not give you a data at this time. The physical conditions are irreversible because of conditions that are not physical within the personality. I will here close the session, giving you a fairly brief one because of circumstances, and I suggest for the rest of this week that Ruber limit his psychological time experiments to 15 minutes a day rather than a half hour, simply because he is under some strain. You will be given all support from me and from others in a situation which will develop, and Ruber will find that he will come through with a minimum of difficulty. Considering the normal discomfiture involved in any circumstance of such nature, that is, there will be no added strain due to the unusual relationship that has existed between him and his mother. The situation for his mother would be much worse if she lingered, and she will find an exuberance, well-being, understanding, and sense of peace that she simply has not known in this particular existence. I close now with sympathy and best wishes as always, and with some regret that I find myself in a position of corroborating this type of material. Needless to say, your increased abilities will make you aware of much added joy and bring much pleasure, as well as sometimes bringing you tidings of this kind, and again, even now, they serve to give you time for inner preparations. Rob said, "Good night, Seth."